You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got some special guests in the building. I don't want to mess up your name, so I'm going to try to say it as correct as possible. Donna Brazil.
Well.
All right. Yolanda CARAWAY. LEAH DAUGHTry.
I'm here.
All right. And Minyon Moore.
That's it.
Minyon Moore.
She had it right.
She had it right. Welcome, ladies.
Go for it.
Thank you.
You have a new book for colored girls who have considered politics.
Now, this was great because for me, it gave me a lot of historical context on how a lot of things happened that we don't even consider.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think about, like, how did Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday become a national holiday?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and how difficult it is working behind the scenes. Yeah. So for each of you, how did you get involved in politics at all? I know it's in the book, but...
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
I was 14 years old, and I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Mm-hmm.
The Rock.
And a friend of mine came up to me. I was in high school, and a friend of mine came up to me one day and said, "Why don't you come down and volunteer to work for Bobby Kennedy, who was running for the Senate at that time?"
Mm-hmm.
And this was a year after President Kennedy had been assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, that sounds interesting. And I was always looking for something to do after school, so I didn't have to go home. So I took the bus every day, went down from one end of town to the other end of town, stuffed envelopes, made phone calls, and by the end of the campaign, I was out canvassing and knocking on doors and talking to people, and actually sounded like I knew what my 14-year-old self was saying.
Did they pay you, or was it free?
No, volunteer. That's how everybody gets started.
Because at 14, like politics, like would you want to? At 14, would I want to get into politics? I wasn't even thinking about politics.
Well, I wasn't thinking about either too much. I had a brother-in-law that was very involved, and he ran the NAACP in the city. And so I was kind of on the periphery, but I had never thought about, volunteering to work on a campaign. And she just said, and I said, okay, well, this might be interesting.
Weren't you like a candy striper or something?
Oh, that was the same summer I was a candy striper that summer.
What is a candy striper?
You don't know what a candy striper is?
No.
Oh, come on.
God, the boys love candy stripers.
What is a candy striper?
Candy stripers are volunteers. You volunteer at a hospital, and you get this outfit that's like looks like a candy cane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it's got red stripes, red white stripes.
Wow.
So they call them candy stripers. No, I was emptying dead bedpans and everything else. And the first time I wanted to be a doctor. First time somebody I worked in the emergency room. First time somebody rolled in there with some blood, I was out. That was it. That ain't it. So the political thing kind of interested me.
Gotcha.
So I said, I can help people doing it another way.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, what about you? How'd you get into politics?
Well, I'm from Chicago.
And that's Minyon.
Minyon.
Yeah. I'm from Chicago, and I actually got involved through Operation Push, but I was working on the historic race of Harold Washington. And it was a bunch of young people looking to get involved. So we took ourselves down to his campaign and asked, okay, where do we volunteer? The young people want to volunteer. They say, okay, you can go sit over in that corner. You got a table, you can volunteer. And so we ended up getting a bunch of young people involved in Harold Washington's campaign, and it became the margin of victory. We didn't know what our power was. We just knew that we wanted to be involved, and I wanted to be involved in this historic race because it was all over the city of Chicago. So that's really how I got started.
And you, Leah?
I'm from Brooklyn, and Brooklyn in the house. My father pastors a church on Atlantic Avenue, the Reverend Herbert Daughtry, and so we got started because out of our church movement, we were always very civically minded and civically engaged. So part of our understanding of our faith is that you do what you can to help make the community better. And for us, I was 6 years old, and I went with my dad to a boycott of A&P Supermarket. Some of y'all not old enough to remember A&P, but that was the big supermarket chain back then. And they
only 21. I don't remember that. I'm lying. Go ahead.
A&P went, and they wouldn't hire black people. They wouldn't hire black people. So we were boycotting outside because of their hiring practices. And we were with Reverend Jackson. My father was chair of Operation Breadbasket. So from there, I learned about how the community can engage to try to make things better. So we did all kinds of campaigns, making sure people were registered to vote, that they could get to the polls, that they knew what the issues were, who the candidates were. All the candidates rolled through our church as a part of the civic education. So that's how I kind of got engaged and involved in understanding what the electoral political process could do. Really, for me, it was very basic. How can I make Brooklyn better?
Right.
And so whatever it was, whether it was about the trash days or, the one-way streets, or when the street sweepers come through and mess up the whole pattern. That was like, how can I make these things better for the people in the neighborhood where I live? Okay. And I picked politics, electoral politics, and I realized that who's in office impacts all of that.
And you talk about Operation Breadbasket, and you discuss that in the book as well. And that's interesting because that's something I feel like we still try to do, like, to this day, and we should. But I don't know if it's as effective. I mean, it could be if we could organize the same way that you guys organize, which I don't think we do as much today. No. But talk about what Operation Breadbasket was for people who don't know.
Operation Breadbasket was the economic arm of Dr. King's SCLC movement. So where SCLC was involved with pure civil rights sort of actions, the desegregation and so forth. Operation Breadbasket was focused on the economics of the issue, because if people don't have a job, if people don't have a living wage, then that impacts their dignity. It impacts how they're able to maneuver and fulfill their own idea of what their destiny is. So places like A&P, who are in the community taking our money but don't want to hire us, is problematic. So Operation Breadbasket found these places across the country, and my father chaired the New York branch of Operation Breadbasket, and they targeted these businesses where we spent, years ago, downtown Brooklyn, Fulton Street was where everybody shopped. And you have all these stores, Martin's, Mays, A&S.
My parents met at Martin's. They worked at Martin's
See
together.
what I'm saying?
That's how they
That's
met.
where we spent our money. That was the only, you either went there or you went out, right, all the way to Kings Highway to shop. And you're taking our money, but you're not hiring our people. And that's not right. You're not investing back in the community. So Operation Breadbasket and the work we did in Brooklyn in the early 80s was about changing the dynamic and making those merchants responsible to us.
And what about you, Donna? How did you get into politics?
Oh, I just came out of a sky after the moon landing, and I showed up with some Tang. You probably don't remember that, too, but that was the first drink of the astronauts.
They still make that?
They do. They still make Tang.
They still make it. I think so.
Tang.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
seen
drink
it.
Tang all the time.
Well, for the record, we love Tang.
We love Tang. I started almost the moment I learned that Dr. King was assassinated. I was 8 years old. I grew up right outside of New Orleans, and my mother and father were still at work, but my grandmother called us into her room, and she told us to get on our knees because Dr. King had been shot, and we wanted to pray for him and pray for his family. And later that evening, when my mom and dad came home, they informed us that he was dead, and we had to pray again. But this time, my grandmother also told us that we had to pray for whoever murdered him. And I objected, and because I'm like, I'm not going to pray for someone who killed Dr. King.
I ain't gonna waste my prayers.
Well, of course. And my grandmother, took me aside and said, yeah, Dr. King was about love, and we have to learn how to pray for our enemies. And that was that moment in my childhood and in my life that I understood what I wanted to do when I became an adult. And I told my mother that I wanted to be a civil rights worker. And, of course, a year later, I got involved in my first campaign at the age of 9 because I had a candidate who promised to build a playground in our neighborhood. And so the playground was installed, and I've had a lifelong career in politics.
Now, how did you guys get together? How did you guys all meet? Because you're from so many different places.
Well, Don and I were the first to meet back in the early 80s, and I was working on the Hill for a congresswoman. She was congresswoman then, became a senator later, Barbara Mikulski. And I was the legislative correspondent, and I had a little cubicle and a little lowly job. I know Mignon tells me not to say it was a lowly job.
Because she was a correspondent. She was communicating with the people,
yes,
constituents.
Yes,
It wasn't lowly. I get
know.
excited about that.
Anyways, me and my little lowly job was sitting in my cubicle, and somebody came in to me and asked me if I would meet with. There was a young lady that wanted to talk about something, and she thought I might be interested in meeting with her. Well, I couldn't figure out why they were asking me to meet with anybody. Who was I? But anyways, I got up and I went outside. The place was so small, I couldn't even meet in my space. So I went outside the front door, and I was so happy to see a sister because I had seen so few of them since I'd been there. And, we became lifelong friends. She was advocating for the holiday.
Right.
And she wanted the congresswoman to sign on. And I was so happy when we did a staff meeting because I actually had something to report and something to ask her to do.
Gotcha.
So it was kind of a deliverable for me.
And how'd you meet everybody else?
Minyon I met in probably 80. Well, when I would work for Reverend Jackson in 85, I think it was. And Leah came to work for me when I was working for Ron Brown, and we were doing site selection for the 92 convention.
Now, with politics, a lot of people are scared to get into politics because they feel like it's a big lie. They feel like it never helps our community. What do you say for especially the young black and brown women that are thinking about it or are not even thinking about it? Why is it important to get into politics?
Well, the good news is, as we've been on this tour, we have seen more young people engaged than almost any sector. And they come up, they ask very thoughtful questions. And I think what we've tried to do is demystify the process, because none of us got involved in politics at the highest levels. We either started in our community, we started wanting to make a change. And so what we try to tell people is you got to look at very basic things about politics. It controls your life. It controls how we want to reform criminal justice. It controls the jury. It controls the Supreme Court justice. It controls the type of legislators you elect. It controls the type of presidents we get. And one vote can make a difference. And while you are not seeing it every day in your pocket, you can see it in your pocket if you hold your electeds accountable. What we tend to do, especially young people and brown and black people, we elect them, we go all out for them, we're all on the radio, we're all screaming, go, 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 and then it's over.
We fall back.
They write the laws. Politicians write the laws that we have to abide by.
Yes, right.
I mean, politicians get to appoint sheriffs. Politicians appoint people that's impact where we live, where we're able to make groceries, and so it's important that we don't run away from politics just because politicians may not always agree with us or even look like us. But the reason why we need more people of color in politics is because we're underrepresented, and our voices are not at the table. If you're not at the table when decisions are being made, then
You're probably on the menu.
you're on the menu.
You're definitely on the menu.
And that's a theme throughout the whole book. You guys talk about how important it is to have a seat at the table in these conversations. Now, one thing that stuck out to me was working for Jesse Jackson, right, when he was running for president, how important it is to sometimes winning doesn't mean that you win and you become the president. There's a lot of wins that come along with that as well. So what are some things that you guys learned working on that campaign, and what are some of the wins that you got from Jesse Jackson running for president?
Well, I mean, so many, but you're right. Reverend Jackson's campaign really helped us understand that there are many ways to win. So when we started, it was we're going to win the presidency, we're going to the White House. But along the way, I think we understood and we learned that winning has many definitions. And so what came out of the campaign is we got into rooms we didn't even know existed. We got to learn a process that's been going on all around us every day that we just didn't know anything about. And he took us into those rooms. Hundreds of us who got trained on the Jackson campaigns, who are now running campaigns, who are in elected office, who are in their communities making a difference because of what they learned on the campaign. Registered hundreds of thousands of people to vote that then got to by the end of the Jackson era, every major city in America had a black mayor. Every major city in America had a black mayor. And
congressional members.
New congressional members. Maxine Waters came to Congress as a result of the Jackson era. And so many more. When I first went to work on the Hill, there were only 18 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now there are 50 some odd members of the Black Caucus. He changed the party rules so that the way that we elect presidents is different because of his demands. And
for this generation, it's very important to understand the reason why President Obama and Hillary Clinton were able to even get the nomination is because Reverend Jackson had the rules changed. It was, the Republicans had this system, winner take all.
And they still have that, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we had proportional representation, because if we had winner take all, we would never even get through the pipeline.
So to break that down, so if you have a state like Michigan, under the Republican rules, if you win the most delegates, if you win the most, let's say you win 51% of the vote. Under Republican system, you get all the delegates.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Under our system, because of Reverend Jackson's demands, if you win 40% of the vote, you get 40% of the delegates. So it's a proportional thing, which allows other candidates to be involved and to stay in the race longer because it's a true reflection of how people voted.
But Leah, there's one other point that we should make about the 40%. The 40% looks like the electorate that
That's
elected
right.
you.
Exactly.
And so
That's
if
right.
you look at the Republican convention every 4 years, you're almost blinded by the light.
That's right.
But if you look at the Democratic convention, you see the diversity of our country. And that's the important thing, is that our party is more diverse, it's more representative of the grassroots and the people that elect presidents. That's what's important to understand about the Jackson effect. And if you look at 1988 to 2008, that was the Jackson effect.
Right.
The ability to transform the electorate to make it more representative of the people of this country. Jesse Jackson ushered in that era. So we have a lot to be grateful for in terms of his leadership and the leadership of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. One of the things we also talk about in the book is all of the women who made the difference in the Civil Rights era,
The Civil Rights
including
widows.
Dorothy Height,
Yeah.
the widows, Betty Shabazz, Coretta Scott King, Myrlie Evers, these women also made a huge difference in the lives of where we are today and where we need to go in the future.
Are we
I wanna-
ready for? I'm sorry. go ahead.
I want to back up 1 second and go back to Reverend Jackson. And one of the biggest wins that we got out of that campaign was Ron Brown becoming chair of the party.
Are we ready for the first Black African American president? Are we ready for that female? I should say.
Oh,
Are
I
we
was
ready
like,
for
we've
that?
already had it.
Yeah, right.
Are we ready for the first female African American? Is
We're ready.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, to me, I think you asked one of the most important questions that we have to answer as a country, because I have seen how they tear women down in this country. I have seen it
You've
up
seen it with
close.
Hillary Clinton, correct?
But I've seen it with Nancy Pelosi. I've seen it with Maxine Waters.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
The
Waters.
bigger they are, the more threatening they become.
Absolutely.
So we need voices like yours to say, hey, listen, these women have earned their seat at the table. And until we do that, until men, until women, all of us collectively say that, then I personally don't think that we will get there unless we do the same thing we did for President Obama. This is acceptable. They've earned it. They've earned the right to do it. Otherwise, we'll still be sitting here next year we got
2 years.
24.
And how many
and
black
that's-
men voted against Stacey Abrams?
Yeah. Oh, God, 15%.
But why is that? I feel like we don't support our own enough.
Yeah.
And even with with the next presidential term, the election, I should say, I feel like we wait too long to start.
That's
like
right.
why? How come we're not starting now?
Yeah.
And there's so many of us. It's like I understand that maybe Cory Booker, maybe this one, maybe that one, but I feel like when we do that, we kind of take a stance against each other. Even with Hillary Clinton, people who were going for Bernie was
They
like, "Well,
didn't
I'm not
transfer
voting for
those
Hillary."
votes over to
Right.
Hillary.
And people who were voting for Hillary, like, I'm not voting for Bernie. Like, it gets that, you have that divide.
Right,
Where I
yeah.
see Republicans, they just seem like they just all ride with each other. How do we stop that where we can say, all right, let's all support each other and all start riding earlier? Because right now, we don't even know who's running in the next election as far as Democrats are concerned.
Well, we need to
so many
stop
of them.
focusing on
lot of them.
personalities and
Yeah.
start focusing on an agenda. What we lack sometimes is the ability to understand what is bigger than the person who is
Yeah.
running for office. And when I saw Hillary Clinton rise up and speak about all of the great issues of our time, whether it was climate change, because we're all suffering
Right.
as a
Yeah.
result of climate change. We might not know it, but
I think our cab driver was suffering from something.
He was called crazy.
I had an Uber driver. Same thing. But here's the point I'm making. We need to understand we should have a country where there's a living wage.
Yeah.
The minimum wage is unacceptable.
Right.
$7.25. You go and you can't get a dozen of eggs and a loaf of bread for less than $6.50.
You're right.
All right, and don't talk about the cost of gasoline if you got to buy gas on the way to get yourself some food. So we need to have a living wage. We need to also reform our criminal justice system. We just authorized in Congress billions of dollars for the opioid crisis. We want to make sure anybody who is addicted to opioids get help and treatment. But 20 years ago, with the crack cocaine epidemic,
Right.
we incarcerated those individuals.
right.
We never looked at drug addiction as something that could be treated.
health
That's right.
And now we have millions of people incarcerated with nonviolent crimes because they simply came at the wrong time.
Still in jail.
Still in jail.
Right.
And so the reason why we're strong advocates for political activism and advocacy is because we know it impacts our community, it impacts our lives and our livelihoods. And if we don't take a strong position, and yes, black women have never been afraid to speak up, stand up, and shout out to the rooftop. But we need brothers, sisters, and everybody in between to come and stand with us so that we can fight for justice and equality for everyone.
But I want to actually get back to your real question about why we're taking so long to get to where we have to go, and especially for 2020. I think part of the process probably bore itself out of 216. First of all, they thought Hillary somehow stole the nomination when in fact she won the nomination.
Overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly with pledged
And the
delegates.
election.
But I think it's important, especially for the young people that are listening, it gives them a bird's eye view right now of who's out here talking, whether it's Kamala, whether it's Cory Booker, whether it's Montana guy. It's about 20 of them right now.
Right.
And they need to really watch this process and watch it unfold and be a part of it. If they are active about somebody and they like somebody, then that's how you get your candidate forward. You got to get in the game and say, hey, listen, I am riding this horse. And sometimes you got to be courageous and say, I'm riding with Cory, or I'm riding or dying with Kamala, or whoever you're choosing. Get on that wagon, because many of us hitch to wagons very early. We just do. You make that decision. It's a choice. And so I think it gives people enough time to really start looking at these candidates. But I kind of agree with you, because I feel like when you have an incumbent and they have as much money as this guy we have in the White House, we have to really figure out how we're going to have a nominee that can compete. But it's still early, but we still need.
Because even with Bernie, like you look at the people that were riding with Bernie.
Yeah.
They were riding with Bernie so much they hated Hillary.
Yes.
So when Hillary won,
And they
it was
made
like,
people hate Hillary as well.
It was like when Hillary won, it was like, well, I'm not messing with Hillary. But all it did was put Trump in office.
Because you lose sight of the goal.
Yeah, that's right.
And the goal is to, for us, we're Democrats, was to elect a Democrat. But for others, whether you're Democrat or not, is to defeat Trump. And so we got so focused on the cult of personality that we forgot what the big prize was. And as we say, let's not major in the minors. And that's what 2016 and the end boiled down to, where people were majoring in the minors and forgetting what the real issue was this guy's unqualified to be the president of the United States.
Do you think that whole process needs to change in the future with the Electoral College?
Definitely.
yes.
The Electoral College is a
could
remnant of
change?
slavery and our checkered past as a democracy. And we need to update all of our election laws, including the Electoral College, to better represent the people that it serves. I want to say something, because I think it's important to acknowledge that Bernie Sanders was one of the few white politicians back in the 1980s that embraced and supported the Rainbow Coalition and Jesse Jackson. And I think he has been a tremendous force for change throughout his career. However, he is not a registered Democrat. He caucused with the Democratic Party in the United States Senate, and he ran as a Democrat for president of the United States. I think it's important
then he went back to being an independent.
And he went back to being an independent. I believe it's important that we embrace people who walk into the room and bring about the necessary change, but we also have to define our own terms. We're Democrats. We're lifelong Democrats. We're committed Democrats, and we're committed to enabling independents and non-affiliated individuals to be involved in our party, but they need to help us build a more progressive party that can fight the Republicans and not just leave the room once their candidate disappeared from the room. Right. So that's my position on Bernie.
I also want to say, because, we're Democrats, but that doesn't mean I love everything the Democratic Party does, or that I love everything the Democratic Party stands for. I got issues on some things, but again, let me keep my eye on the prize. What we got on this, what I believe in is the values of the party. Right. I believe in the principles of the party, so I'm willing to fight inside the party and outside the party for those values and for those principles. Sometimes that means, I'm not rock. I don't love the Democratic candidate, but better than the other guy who wants to take all my rights away. So let me stay on this side of the aisle, and I will fight with them. I will fight for them. I will close the door and do all my screaming and yelling and cussing that I'm going to do. But I'm not abandoning the values or the principles of the party because sometimes they get on my nerves.
Well, what are your thoughts on Black Republicans then? What do you think of Black Republicans?
I have a lot of friends who are Black Republicans.
What do you think?
And a lot of them have been Republican since their families have been Republican since slavery. They just never changed.
Historically, that is where Black voters landed after the end of
After the
slavery, after the
Reconstruction.
15th Amendment. Black men, especially, who had the right to vote during that time. But
And then they switched after FDR and the New Deal.
Right.
We all went over to the
And
most
John
of us.
F. Kennedy.
And look, I think they have their own set of principles and values. A lot of them is just family loyalty for the party. Some of them are very economically conservative, socially conservative, and so they're pro-life, and so they want to rock with them. For them, the argument we always have is that your only issue? If your only issue is around pro-life, then let me see you be pro-life after the baby is born, and some policies that enhance people's lives. But look, they've got their principles. But I will say, almost 2-1, they disagree with this president. They didn't vote for this president, and they have real problems with his qualifications and with his stances on a variety of issues. So, but for them, it is not party over country. It's country over party. So they're willing to part ways with the party because of this man that's in office.
What about people who don't vote and say that they don't want to vote? Because in the book you do detail what we went through to be able to vote. So what do you say to people who are like, well, I'm not voting because I don't like any of the candidates, and it doesn't mean anything because the person I voted for didn't win?
If it didn't mean anything, they wouldn't be trying so hard not to let you vote.
That's right.
There's value in your vote, and if your vote was of no value, they wouldn't be trying all this voter suppression stuff that we've seen over these last two races. It's just it's an okie doke.
And young people, they love to say we woke. Okay, then wake up to the fact that is the most powerful instrument you have in your hands, and if you use it, you will understand how powerful you are. Don't think that saying I don't want to vote because I don't like somebody or they're not doing anything for me makes you powerful. It makes you weak because that's what they want you to think mentally.
They want to keep
and
us down.
The thing that I love about these young people, they are strong in mind, they are committed in mind, but the one thing they reject is their own right to their power.
Right.
If they take that vote away from you, then you almost have nothing because this whole country is built on your right to vote. And I would not sleep that. Stay woke.
This is now 2018. In 14 years, the majority of the electorate will be Black and brown. 14 years. All I'm saying to my young friends and colleagues, and I'm a college professor, is that know your value and
Know your worth.
Know your worth, of course, but use your power. You cannot. What are you going to do?
Absolutely.
Are you going to let somebody else run your life, make decisions for you? In 14 years, you're going to be the majority of voters, the majority of the electorate. Millennials are already the majority of the electorate. I'm looking at one right now. You are the power. You're the future. And if you vote, then you win.
You win.
And you don't have to deal with a Trump or Trumpism ever again in America. We lost in 2016 by 78,000 votes. And we can come up with many reasons why we lost. But the one thing that I will always believe is that had more Americans voted, 100 million people stayed home. Damn. 100 million eligible voters. So every day you wake up and complain about the tweets, complain about his attitude, complain that he is sending troops to the border with children. Every day you complain about that. I'm saying, you know what? Get up and vote.
That's right.
And then you know what? You can tell Trump you're fired.
That's right.
Period.
And let me ask you guys a question now.
Sure.
Now this is a very important question. Probably gonna be a hard question. I'm a DJ. So if you ask me about DJ equipment, I can guide you.
Yeah.
Ask me about a club, I can guide you. Now for people out there that don't know much about politics, just trying to get into it, just read whatever they read on the paper, what they hear on the Breakfast Club. For the next election, presidential, who should they be looking at?
First of all, I don't know. You're a DJ.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're important to the
Very
fabric.
important.
Very
Oh,
important.
God, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of young people look up to you and listen to you.
And let me just say this. We know that there will be perhaps 15, 20 people considering the run for president.
Correct.
We all heard when Oprah decided that she wasn't going to throw her hat in the ring or her gloves. And by the way, I want to send my special wishes to her. She just lost her mom, and I know how difficult and painful that can be. But we have so many people. You mentioned Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. Deval Patrick, Eric Holder. That's just the black ones.
Yeah.
We start mentioning the women
And the Hispanics.
and the Hispanics.
We're loving it.
And then, as Yolanda would say, the old white men and the young white men.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna have a lot.
We got Beto out here
Beto.
now.
Now Beto says he might run.
Yeah.
But you know what? We need to listen to everybody, hear their songs, see if we enjoy their lyrics and the melody. And if we don't, guess what? Let's go back to the channels we know. Let's go back to the music we know. But we need to at least hear from them. We need to hear from everybody. And then at the right hour, we'll make up our mind.
We'll come back.
And people were so upset last time because they didn't feel they had a choice. They didn't like Bernie or they didn't like Hillary. Well, this time they're going to have plenty of choices. So there is no excuse.
And you'll see how dangerous it was when they didn't vote last time.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we got to keep them. But we got to keep. I think we cannot. We got to keep this drum going.
Right.
Every day we have to say something to keep people woke because we will go
Yeah.
into a lull when nothing is happening. The elections are over.
Yep,
You don't
yep.
hear it on TV. You don't see it. So we got to still.
We were at the
Stay
Jacob
woke.
Javits Center when
I
we all thought Hillary was going to win.
I know.
My daughter,
I know.
my daughter
God.
thought she was going to see her first. I mean, we were
My
there.
mom with me.
Tell her to keep that dress.
Oh, God.
Because
Keep that dress.
Yeah, so we coming back some kind of way with a woman.
We're coming back with a woman. I just want to make one other point, and it's a personal one, but it's one that I want your audience to understand. When Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana, we know that many lives were lost and people lost practically everything.
Right.
We just saw the devastation of a fire in California. We saw the humanitarian crisis down in Puerto Rico following a storm. Just remember that the people who make the decisions on whether or not you get help and whether or not you get aid and you can rebuild your lives, that's the government.
Right. And,
So-
and remember what the president tweeted when those incidents happened as well.
Couldn't get aid to Puerto Rico because it's surrounded by water.
Blame
But
the
it would.
people in California for their own wildfires.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
told them
yeah.
that they need to go out and rake. Rake.
Break.
He has no
Break the
clue.
forest floor.
Yeah, he
Break
has
the
no
leaves.
clue.
He ain't raked a damn thing in his life. Don't get me started.
Well, we-
No, wait, working on campaigns, right? Now, Michelle Obama has said, when they go low, we go high. But sometimes that doesn't work out. And you guys have all worked on campaigns where there's a lot of mudslinging
Why
going
you laughing
on.
over there? She said, why you laughing over there?
I'm not going to say who, but someone even got fired for...
What's wrong with that?
She ain't never quiet on her firings.
Oh no, my dismissals?
How hard is it when you know you could fight dirty if you want to?
Oh, I
Do you
like
think
to
that
fight
there's ever a
dirty
time for that?
Yes.
She said, I like to fight dirty.
You know, I don't call it fighting dirty. I think
Thankfully.
that when you're working on a
gotta fight
campaign, you have to fight. You know, the voters have a right to know
Yes.
information about candidates.
Right.
And so these days, everything's an open book. People post everything on social media. And if you are my opposition, then I think people ought to be able to understand what you said, when you said it, and the context in which you said it. And so I might feel that I'm helping the voters by putting out information that will help them make a sound decision. Sometimes listen. You can put it out yourself. I can put it out for you.
Right.
So I don't see it as fighting dirty. I think when it gets to character assassination, when you involving people's children, that's where I draw a line.
What about affairs? What do you think about that, Donna? Like talking about...
Well, let me just say this.
Somebody's normalized them.
That's a question of judgment and
I was,
character.
20 years too early for that conversation. But you know what did wrinkle me, and it wrinkled me again, and when I saw it in 2008, it wrinkles me when I saw it in 2016. When you have openly racist content, I mean, look at the down in Mississippi. I mean, now we're normalizing hanging.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Are we now
yeah,
normalizing all of this stuff?
Right.
We're normalizing hate and hate speech in our country.
Absolutely.
And I've always spoken out against it. And yes, there are times when I'm controversial and it has caused me an early dismissal. It's like going to church, you get your communion, you go home. Because the wine you had wasn't enough, you want more. So I got an early termination. But it never stopped me from caring about my community and fighting for my country. And yes, sometimes that's the price you pay in politics.
Can we get a little gossipy here?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Monica Lewinsky now doing participating in this documentary?
I've been watching that documentary like crazy, too.
I bet you have, Envy.
Yo, Bill Clinton
What do y'all
was-
think
he
about that?
was
Is that
wow.
Is that something that
Listen
you
to
would watch?
you.
And do you think that for Monica Lewinsky, what do you think about her actually participating and telling her story?
They lucky it wasn't a social media era. That's all I'm gonna say. He was wow. But go ahead.
Lord, I hated talking about my former boss. Let me.
Did he ever hit on you? Because he liked black women.
No.
You sure?
No. I am positive. I lived through the Lewinsky era. But let me be serious for 1 second. I have not seen the documentary, but I hear it's quite interesting.
It is.
Yeah, but I will say this: for 20 years, she said nothing. She said nothing about what happened. She said nothing about, what it did to her. So I felt like 20 years of her life had been put on hold. So she owed it probably to herself and probably to her healing to come out and say something. And so to that degree, I believe that it was okay and fine for her to do what she did. I think the thing where I take issue with all of it is nobody ever asks us, how did Hillary feel about this?
Right.
How did Chelsea feel about this? How did that impact their lives? Because there was a wife involved, there was a child involved, there was a country involved. I worked for the president at the time, and I knew that we were in a crisis, but we also knew that we doubled down and made sure that what he was elected to do, we delivered on it. But the fact is, he still had a family, and he had to make amends with his family first. Mm-hmm. And that was tough enough. If you know Hillary, y'all sat with Hillary.
Yeah.
Y'all know Hillary. That was tough enough. And his daughter is also as smart as she is. So I would say, now that the ladies have said what they have to say, can we go on? Because we have a current situation here, people, that has been normalized and nobody talks about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's all I have to say about that.
Absolutely.
And I still love my president, President Clinton, because he was a good president.
He was a good president.
Well, we appreciate you for joining us, and you guys could pick up the book
This is good. We're
right
gonna do this
now.
again.
For colored girls who have considered politics, and I appreciate this book. I have 3 young black girls, and I like to see them think outside the box. That's why I was so big on my oldest meeting, Hillary. And I'm so big on her thinking outside of just normal things. That's you can be whatever you want, and Barack Obama being president proved that. Because as a kid, I was not thinking about being a president, but my son can.
That's right.
That's
beautiful.
But thank you guys for joining us.
And
we appreciate
thank you,
and
thank you
book.
for all your great work.
Thank you. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.